All right, it is 6 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Christian County Library Board of Trustees meeting. If anybody needs tonight's agenda, it is on the table between the two doors out there. We'll start with the consent agenda. Are there any items that we need to remove from the consent agenda and discuss individually?
I didn't see anything.
That's okay to me.
Okay. Is there a motion to pass the consent agenda?
So moved.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call. Trustee Alexander?
Aye.
Trustee Brazil?
Aye.
Trustee Garrity?
Aye.
Trustee Hagan?
Aye.
All right, moving on to administrative highlights, the strategic plan update.
So I think that Tori gave you the official printout, the brochure style copies that you have. Yes, I forget what it's called, trifold or whatever. Sorry, Nicholas, I forgot the right term for it. So this is just kind of an update of kind of the reflection of work that we've done so far and work we still have to do. It is not like detailed every single project and every single timeline. It's just kind of a snapshot of things that have been done and things we still have to do, just kind of mid-year or time period in the strategic plan. This can be something that serves as a partner with our annual report, like if we're talking with legislators or stakeholders in the community to kind of just give an idea of some of the different things that we're working on. So the objectives timeline, I just wanted to point out at the bottom, is not every single thing. We have a lot of things in the strategic plan that is kind of like continue to do this or evaluate this, and we tried not to put those kind of boring nebulous things in the timeline, but have some more specific accomplishments that we've done and specific projects that we've been working on. So it is not exhaustive list as far as the timeline goes. And that timeline is squishy a little bit. We try to kind of stick to it, but as projects come up that we weren't expecting and things arise, we might have to shift something from summer to fall, or we might accomplish it quicker than we think, and it ends sooner. So that's kind of just an overview, and if you have questions, I'm happy to take them. I didn't intend to go into a ton of detail. I did also want to point out, as far as the front or the back piece of it and kind of that side 2023 at a glance panel, just some numbers to give both a snapshot of 2023 when we began the strategic plan, but also the kind of looking back a bigger 2019 to 2022, just to give an example of sort of the scope of the district and some of our key numbers. And these are if this is a companion with our annual report just covers 1 year, so then you can kind of see in context of bigger timeline how our strategic plan fits in with the annual report. So, any questions or comments or anything on that? Okay. And communications did a really great job of, we always struggle with we have so much information, how do we package it in a way that's meaningful and interesting, and I'm just continually impressed with the staff in communications and how they're able to put a bunch of information on paper and make it not boring, and also you can pick out some tidbits and learn some things. So.
Excellent, thank you. Anybody have any questions, comments for me? All right, moving on to our old business, pre-design services, the bulk of this stack in front of our face.
Which is mostly pictures of libraries and other construction projects. I did the summary of kind of some context of what we, and some of this was specifically for John, since he hasn't been part of the board discussions about this, but I didn't go into, the more I wrote, I was like, oh, well, there's this detail, and then I took some stuff out because the summary needed a summary at that point. So just kind of to revisit what we talked about last time, which was in May, is we have 3 different firms, and we had some discussions about the legalities of how we should be selecting these firms, and that even the firms kind of each had different perspectives on how we should be handling it. But ultimately, I do think their qualification, they're all going to work within our budget. Their qualifications is really what we should be looking at, although they've all done completed library projects in the areas, so they all have sort of proven qualifications, but we've worked with SAP with past projects before, but I know libraries who've worked with all three of these firms, and they all have some positives and some negatives to say about all of them, and nothing alarming or super standouty either way. But so the question really is like, how do you want to proceed? Do you want to select one of these firms to do the pre-design service? Do you want to not proceed at all and maybe do some in-house development of some pictures? We can come up with a few things and do, a bigger ballpark number, like, and say we'll probably need $5 to $10 million. Like, that's real broad, but it's probably going to be in that range. Or do you want to do a formal RFQ process and select somebody to take us from the very beginning to the very end? Like, we could choose who we want to do the renovation, but then we have to spend a lot of time building that RFQ and kind of deciding what we really need from
What's an RFQ?
request for qualification.
Okay.
No, it's a request for quote. Excuse me.
Request for quote?
Well, for the architectural stuff, it's qualifications because that's how it has to be decided from a legal basis.
And then afterwards, the quote. Personally, I would like to take this back at home and compare it with the notes I took before and read through this. I've made a few calls about the different firms, but I would like to have time to read through this thoroughly. Is that okay? Does anybody feel strong about making a decision tonight, or can we table making suggestions?
Wait, yeah.
Pardon?
I would wait, yes,
Oh.
ma'am.
Okay.
Can you pass this down?
Sure.
So I printed out the letter that the Attorney General sent out for quality-based selection, QPS. I think, Renee, you're familiar with that. On page 2 of this, it lists the criteria that you would use to determine the quality of the vendor. I think it's a really good list of things. It doesn't include price, but it talks about proximity, quality, their ability to actually perform the work. I think we should use this as a metrics to select the vendor. But yeah, I think we need to take it home and take. I've only had this stuff for one day, so.
Right.
You haven't been able to
This
get
is-
through all of that?
That list is typically used, and we can go whatever direction you want. I'm just giving some background. Typically used when you're selecting an architect to construct or do a renovation, which is not what we're asking of them. So there's nothing wrong with using those qualifications right now for this, but it is pre-design services, which are actually architectural services, and like the probable opinion of probable cost, space planning, and then some conversations. So if my one of my thoughts is if we're going to get real deep into those qualifications, that maybe we should be selecting someone to do the end-to-end project and not just design, like change our scope of what we're asking for, which is something
So are you thinking
different.
RFQ, like full RFQ? If we're gonna go off of these guidelines, just do one RFQ instead of doing this and then doing it again?
Yes. Yeah, because I think that means the vendors don't have to go through the same thing twice. Some of them prefer to work that way. They prefer, Dave Wells was one that talked about that they prefer to just be the partner from the beginning to the end of the project, which has some validity for sure, but that hasn't been what we've been talking
This
about.
doesn't include, your paper does include much of what we've discussed in April and May, possibly in March. I can't remember if we went back that far. But a lot of what I'm reading here are things that I know I've taken notes on, so it's nice to have that reinforcement and know we have reviewed a lot of this information. Thank you for having it in black and white.
Yeah, and I think, Renee, it's fine to keep it as a pre-design and hold that as an option. It's a carrot for them. They'll keep their costs down lower when they have an option to do the rest of it with you.
Yeah.
Less handoff, if you want to go that way.
So just let me know what you I would like to do.
Do I need to?
Make a
I would
motion
like to
to
make a motion that we table the discussion on the architectural design, choosing the builder, how we're going to go about that. I'd like to table that till next month's meeting.
Is there a second to table the pre-design services discussion to August?
Second.
Roll call vote, trustee Alexander.
Aye.
Trustee Bazile.
Aye.
Trustee Garrity.
Aye.
Trustee Hagan.
Aye.
All right.
Just a detail, can you keep your papers
Yeah,
for next time, and so we don't print them all out again?
But 300 papers?
Yes.
Can't imagine why.
Yes.
Thicker than a trustee binder.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm not missing it. There's no, okay. So Missouri Evergreen discussion.
The summary I provided was, I tried to recap what we had talked about in May and put on paper, and we had talked a little bit about that kind of in between. And then I had reached out to Camden County as requested and asked them if they would be willing to come to the meeting, or either, in person or virtual. And I gave their responses. Some of their staff, the director, didn't seem like he had much to offer the board, and they didn't really respond to attending the meeting. But he asked a couple of the staff that were there at the time of the transition, so I put their information there, and then which was more about the process of the migration than anything. And they seem willing to answer any other questions. So if you have other questions, I can reach out to them again with those.
It's page
Behind
142.
Jeez.
But they're not numbered, so
I was
just
having
after
that
all the
trouble
pictures.
also.
After all the
sorry.
pictures.
Oh, okay, That's the first page after all the pictures. Okay,
Hey,
okay, hold on.
good, I'm not the only one.
And in the electronic packet, all those pictures, are in a
Yes.
separate folder, so
Yes.
it's a little
Okay.
easier to see.
Yeah.
Echo, did you talk to anybody about this, or?
Yeah, the couple libraries that I've talked to, Texas, Douglas, and Stone, their librarians seemed pleased with the experiences overall. One thing, as a IT person by heart, I have heartburn around Mobius's continued downtime. They are expecting backup May, June, now literal no guess at when that will be. So that's, to me, a part of the concern. I work in healthcare, so we can't take systems down indefinitely like that. So that I think needs to be a part of this discussion from a technology solution. We can say that they're a good solution, but if they're literally not available to us, are we anticipating a refund for services not being provided? Or do we have a solution upcoming if they cannot bring their systems back online? I'm curious.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. They, so the system they have migrated to, which is a software called OpenRS, it's actually up and functioning, but there's a few of us public libraries that have not rejoined it because there are a few development features that have not finished yet that we feel like would be kind of customer service deal breakers. And they're working to address those as quickly as possible. They have the company kind of providing that hosting and development has doubled the teams working on them and have been addressing some concerns. But it is a concern. We've been frustrated for sure, and our patrons have too. But I do foresee an end in sight, but I don't have an exact date. And they have been discussing some, like figuring out what concessions they can make as far as the loss of service for the period of time. Okay. Does that answer?
Yeah,
your
no, that's
question?
helpful. And I'm curious too, I don't know a better way to sort of compare the collection items, just knowing realistically how many of the 29 million items versus 4 million items are patron high demand. Like I said, as I've spoken to patrons in Stone County, they had no complaints about books not being available to them or
Right.
items that they were interested in. So I know we talk about the idea that there's the research library and other things, but realistically, I'm curious what percentage of these collections are being utilized by the average patron, or how we break that down. If we say there's millions of things, but
Right.
only 1% of that massive collection is ever being used by the average patron. Is it worth the additional cost versus, are we meeting 95% of our patrons' day-to-day needs with a smaller collection? And that's my impression in speaking with patrons. So I'm curious kind of how we get the patron, considerations or usage against this data.
And with that financial concern, another concern I have is if we do switch, there's going to have to be at least one person totally devoted to completely revamping the entire library system. And with the difference between the 42,000 and 15K, what is that? $27,000, is that enough to pay a person for a year? I don't know the cost of IT people, that seems a little
I'd be pretty surprised if it was a dedicated resource that had no other job.
okay, you
40
think
hour.
it could be a part-time
Being
situation?
that person in
Oh,
healthcare, it's one
yeah.
of your other duties.
I wonder
you
how
add on.
that big crash last week
Yeah.
affected your systems.
It did.
Yeah, I had
Thanks, CrowdStrike.
our and then our family, everything went down. Yeah. And knowing that at least
Yeah.
for 1 year or 2 years, I don't know how long it would take, that we would have to hire someone to do this, because this is more than anybody on staff can just add on an extra
it's
job.
a process for
And
sure.
so that would be a consideration to make sure we did a hiring for that position.
And there would have to be also overlap, correct, of about a year?
Maybe 6
6
months.
months.
I don't know for sure the process for Evergreen, so it may be a matter of timing
Okay.
that we can minimize that, but there would definitely need to be some overlap.
And then explain, so I know that there's a subsidy from the state to keep Evergreen less expensive. Working in grants, I know that you can't rely on them. So what is there a contract right now that expires at a certain point and then it has to be renegotiated? Is this an annual funding thing? How does this work?
Not positive on how the timing works of it for Evergreen, but I believe that the funding that the state library uses to subsidize it comes through IMLS, which is kind of appropriated every year. So my guess is it's a year-to-year thing, but they may have a commitment for a little bit longer for something like this, just because it does support a lot of libraries. And it covers, from what I understand, it covers migration costs, and that would be something that our library would have to write and request the grant for, but there's funds set aside for migration, and they only migrate a certain number of libraries a year, so they know what they have as far as grant funding that they can use for that, and so only add on, except a certain number of new members. And then the rest of the grant goes toward the hosting services for the software. So that's a portion of the total cost. So if that funding went away, then the libraries would have to cover the cost of hosting, and I think that would be different depending upon library size.
And then I had asked you when you asked us if we had any questions about the cost for the library to do something like this, and how that would affect it. Because if a lot of the reason we're looking at this is from a fiscal perspective, I want to make sure we have the entire picture.
Yep.
So obviously you don't know every single thing that's going to, how much every single thing's gonna cost, but like, what does it look like over, like, when we budget, we have to give a year for Mobius, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so let's say we're looking at 2026 at this point. What would our 2026 budget have to look like? How much more would we have to set aside in order to do something like this?
Or would it save? And
Yeah.
Yeah.
For 2026, so I think it would be, we might have to negotiate ahead of time with Springfield Green, like a prorated fee for that. So say 6 months. I'm trying to do math in my head. But like, I think, excuse me, I think we would plan to pay the same amount that we currently do. And hope that we can negotiate like a prorated for Springfield Green and then prorated for Missouri Evergreen and kind of come out even.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe not more than we're spending. We'd have to consider staff time, and that would just kind of depend. I don't know what we would need for sure for that migration, and then what we would need ongoing, because part of what we pay for Springfield Green is kind of some system admin, and I don't know how much of that we would need for Evergreen. I don't envision a full-time person, but if we add that duty to like a current collection services manager, then hiring a part-time different tier of
Right, because you've already
staff
got
member
people
to
there.
help
Yeah.
kind of support things that she then wouldn't be able to do. So maybe even, I think one of the concerns I would have from a unknown financial impact is kind of to Echo's point about like what materials
Percent of the
do we
collection.
get, from Mobius that we couldn't get through Evergreen? And I think, I know we have a lot of we borrow a lot of academic materials, so I know those are not present in Missouri Evergreen. I don't know off the top of my head what percentage. I could get a little bit more data about that, but not super granular data on what percentage of the 30 million that we use. But one thing to consider with the impact to the collection is that because we are one of the smaller libraries in Mobius, we are a net borrower, so we borrow a lot more than we lend. Whereas in Missouri Evergreen, we would be one of the largest in the consortium, in like the top 5, I believe. So I suspect we would be a net lender, which could be an impact upon our collection and our availability for our patrons. So it could be longer wait times, or we might have to increase things like the number of copies of popular materials we get. That's real hard to guess at, but I think it could be a significant impact.
So since we've got lead time, if we're talking about our 2026 budget, does it make sense to now go deeper into research on the collection usage as best we can quantify, if that's the right word, as well as deeper research into the grant to cover those migration costs?
I can do that. I think the question is like what problem are we trying to solve with this? If staff are happy with the system that we have longstanding relationship with Mobius, our patrons love it and use it. And Texas, Douglas, and Stone County are great, but they are all a lot smaller than we are. So they would be apples and oranges when it comes to comparison. So I would want to do a little bit more talking to some of the peer libraries that would be in Missouri Evergreen, but I need to understand, like, is this really about cost saving? If that is, like, if we're trying to save X amount of dollars, my guess is we're gonna break even. Either way, I think the costs are gonna come out pretty similar. That's a guess, but between the increased demand potentially on the collection as well as increased staff time, I don't think from the research that I've done to this point, which is minimal, I think it's not going to save us money. So if I just need to understand it, like I can do more research for sure, but if it's really cost savings that we're looking at, there might be other places in the budget to find some cost savings.
So I would recommend that we as a board, as trustees, make a specific request for Renee to write down to do the research. And again, if she could present, I would move that we trustees right now make specific requests to Renee of what information we would like for her to present to us at the next board meeting to answer our questions as best she could.
So I think the cost to switch is a portion, including can grants cover that increased cost or that migration cost. Another that I would like is the local cataloging options. That was something that Camden County brought forward, is there was unique customization available in their system that we did not currently have available. So I don't know if that's not falling under local catalog, but there was increased catalog options that they were offering as part of the solutions that our patrons have brought forward to us.
Did they give you specific ones that you mentioned?
I can go back to our notes from May and see what I had written down.
I would like a little more information on the information that we will not have access to from a smaller collection, an approximate, how great of an impact is that going to be on our patrons? And then I would also like to know how much relearning, when we change things on our online format, it always, I don't know about other people, it takes me a few tries before it's like, oh, that's where I go to hit this, that's where I look for that. How much revision and relearning is going to be required, not only by staff and being trained, because they're going to need to be trained so they can answer questions. How will this impact our public in their ease of use of the system?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of detail there, which is more like something we would learn in an RFP process for a new ILS. Like if we're looking for a cheaper software, then the traditional path would be to do an RFP and get bids from our current system. There are other software out there. Missouri Evergreen would likely be one of them, and then decide what makes the best sense for our staff and patrons and the community and our budget, et cetera. So
I would like that information.
if we're delving into, should we go with Evergreen, like that's leaving other options out of the process. So
Would that make more sense to put the onus on the vendors to provide all that research for us?
it would make more sense, because then we're getting the vendor telling us what they can commit to versus a library that has different communities than we do in their experiences. But that's a lot of work to do, and I can do it, but I think I would like more time to plan for that, like maybe a next year, honestly, with existing projects and strategic plan things that have already been, approved by the board. Like I will have to remove some things from our existing slate of stuff we're working on in order to do that.
Personally, I would really like that information because in reviewing patron comments from the meetings from the beginning on the difference between Mobius and Evergreen, for me, and forgive me if I misinterpreted those of you who did present some of this in the comments, my understanding that this is to be to help us make us more cost effective and be more aware of our budget. And to do that, I believe, as you said, I think there ought to be more than just two options. And if that takes a little time, because we have older projects on the list, this was a relatively recent discussion versus the building and staff and some of the other things. I would like to have more information. And can you offer us any kind of timeline that you think that is possible?
Honestly, I'd like to think on it to see what, I haven't done a full-scale RFP for an ILS plus resource sharing system. I participated in them with other entities, but I need to look and think through like what all that would include, and then kind of give you a recommendation of if we're gonna do this, here's the timing that makes sense for current.
Do you think you could come up with that basic structure by August or September?
Yeah.
And Renee, may I add that I'm really interested in the core technology as well. Because of the lack of stability in what we have, it's downtime, the lack of perhaps customization that's available. I want to know what's behind what kind of database are they utilizing and that kind of stuff. It's pretty simple questions. They should be able to answer it. And what is their disaster recovery capabilities? Are they in multiple data centers, that kind of thing?
So do we need to?
Do we need just plan to bring that into next month's meeting, and then
Okay.
you can go from there?
So is that okay for this discussion, or do we need a motion on it, or can that just be move it till next, to August?
I think I can just, if it's okay with you guys, I'll just summarize it, and then when I circulate the minutes, if you think
Thank
it's
you
not just great, I left something
for
out.
this. That was part of our goal, was to be more specific. It may be a curse for you, but.
So sort of something to the
Really
effect of,
appreciate
it was discussed, Renee will look and try to provide the board with more information
I will
moving
say,
forward.
just Most library directors I know avoid ILS migrations at all costs.
I've done a data migration, I would also rather.
Doesn't
cut
mean
off
it
my
shouldn't
arm.
happen, but it's pretty intensive, and can be disruptive, so, but
And
if the
then
process
that's-
affirms that what we have is the best option, then maybe it's time to do that as well, so I am willing, but it's not my favorite.
And based on some of the comments from the Camden County folks, it sounds like it was not smooth.
It never is, like a
Oh,
migration
yeah,
will be
a
smooth,
migration's
like-
never smooth. So that's just something to consider the staff time there. Okay. Moving on to new business. Welcome to new trustee. John Garrity is our new trustee from West County, so welcome, John. All right, City of Nixa Utilities Payment Kiosk.
Okay, so I've given you some updates along the way for the past few months in board reports about this. So we've finalized the agreement, so just to hit the highlights, the City of Nixa has been adding a couple of kiosks for people to make utilities payments throughout the city, and they had approached us about having one outside of the library, so knowing the traffic that we get through here, that might be a convenient place and a good community service. So lots of discussions. To summarize the agreement, they're gonna pour a concrete pad by the book drop on the north side. Sorry, I had to think about which direction that was. On the north side of the driveway, so people can drive up to it. So it's intended to be a drive-up kiosk. They're going to give us $1 a year to lease the concrete pad that they're spending the money to pour. They're doing all of the work. We're going to separate out the electric line that's needed, which since they do our utilities, they can do that, but that's all of their work and their cost, so that they can be billed separately, so we won't be paying the electricity even for it.
Do they just put up a separate meter?
Yes, a separate meter, yep. They need security cameras on it, so we are purchasing the security cameras, but they're gonna be reimbursing us the cost of those. And because of our existing DVR, we needed to upgrade our system to add more cameras, so they're sharing the cost of that upgrade. It needed to happen anyway, so we kind of benefit from it, and that allows us to add some more security cameras in the future, which we needed to do since we have the whole building now anyways. So, and then at the end of this, if they decide to quit doing the kiosks in 1 year, 5 years, or whatever, the library will retain ownership of the security cameras. So if they decide after a year it's not that used, then we have some security cameras.
My first question is liability. If something happens to their kiosk or legally, will it be written on paper that we are not liable for the structure or anything positive or negative that happens to the structure?
Yep,
Because
that's all included in here. And
Okay.
Harry reviewed this, our
Okay.
attorney
Yeah,
reviewed
it's
it.
on,
Okay.
it's on page 3.
sorry.
Yep, Diana's checked that.
Yes.
Thank you, Diana. Harry reviewed this,
Okay.
it's all good.
I did not read that
Yeah,
far.
there was a couple
Apologize.
of unique things, like with, since we will own, we own the security, what the security cameras are attached to. So if there's an incident and they need footage, then we won't give them access to our system, we will give them the footage from it. So that keeps them from having access to stuff that they shouldn't have for our
Privacy
sake, et
for our
cetera. So
patrons.
there's kind of partition there.
What's the typical life of a security camera? When do those things become obsolete? I would think that they probably wouldn't last more than 2 or 3 years before they're,
That's a good question,
they don't
not
cost
know.
that much, so I don't know that it matters, but
But
I'm
is it
just
not?
kind of curious. At some point, they're gonna need a software update or a firmware update, and they're not gonna work anymore, and they're gonna have to be replaced.
Yeah, if they're IP cams and they're not too much pointing into the sun, you can get a couple of years out of them.
Oh, okay.
I would think if a person is intelligent when they install them, they will
No.
keep that in. You would hope that would be taken into consideration. Okay. That's
Great.
interesting. Sorry, I had a
Another
friend.
partnership with the city.
Yeah, that's great.
It's great. They're gonna start using our space for all their needs. Fine. As long as they keep paying us for it, that's
Right.
fine.
Before we leave new business, may I make an additional comment
Is it something that's on the agenda?
with our public comments? I see that we have 12, so I'm curious if we could discuss that.
It's not on the agenda, then we can't discuss it today.
Okay.
But we can put it on future agendas if that's what we want to
Let's
do.
do it.
We're gonna move into the public comment section. As per the board's updated public comment policy, the board will not respond to public comments at the time they are made. The board may ask clarifying questions, comment, or take action at their discretion. Questions for staff about library operations should be made during normal business hours. As I've stated before, we do ask for some decorum, respect, no raising of voices, and if you do need to step out, please stay between the two doors. Try not to go all the way out and come back if you can help it. So again, as Echo just stated, there are 12. We have a 30-minute public comment policy, 3 minutes apiece. So we will try to get through as many of these as possible. In order to do that, do you want to go ahead and hand out the stuff from Gretchen?
Yes.
And then, is there anybody else?
We have
who
one
is
other, but I don't
supposed to-
think we'll
okay,
get to her, so I'll
speak that has something to hand out. I want to try to use all of your time. You do?
Those belong to Gretchen.
That way we don't have to use your time to hand things out. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I'm just trying to cut down on as much downtime as possible. As I've done in the past when we've had a lot of speakers, I will let you know who's next so that you can come up and be right there and ready to go. The clock will start when the first person starts speaking. And just so you know, I use Tori as my official timekeeper. She lets me know so that I don't have to look at a clock. I can pay attention to those of you who are speaking. So let's get started. Beth Holtz, you are up. And Laura Umphenor, you are on deck.
My name is Beth Holtz, and I'm a Christian resident in Ozark. I would like to know why Christian County Library is still part of the American Library Association when Secretary of State Ashcroft announced the cut between Missouri and the ALA back in August 2023. He noted that he cannot continue to support an organization that does not protect the First Amendment rights of Missourians and refuses to follow its own governing documents. Ashcroft also stated that the ALA encourages libraries to take measures to stifle a faith-based publisher from holding story hours in libraries across the country, including Missouri. Governor Abbott from Texas commented that the ALA works against parents by fighting to keep pornographic materials in public libraries under the guise of opposing censorship. Part of the reason Missouri and other states have left the ALA is their defense of disputed books, many of which have LGBTQ+ and racial themes. The ALA is no longer an organization that helps communities and is now one that just promotes a view. That view is not the same view as the majority of Christian County. In the ALA's Library Bill of Rights, which states a person's right to use a library should not be denied or abridged because of origin, age, background, or views, should be changed. Campbell County in Wyoming changed that statement to, the library system takes seriously keeping obscene, sexually explicit, or graphic materials out of youth sections. Before legislation is written, the ALA trains librarians to reframe explicit school books as diversity and inclusion. The goal is to sexualize children, produce minors with sexually explicit material, and then hide this content from their parents. Then they lie and say this is about equality. This is about justice. This is about what's right and wrong. It has nothing to do with sex. That's, of course, what someone would do and say if they are grooming your child. This is not the kind of organization that our libraries should be listening to, but they are. Our own library policy manual has the ALA's Library Bill of Rights as our library's Bill of Rights. In fact, our policy states, we support the Library Bill of Rights and the Freedom to Read statement in providing free and open access to our materials for all age groups. Children are not restricted to particular areas of the library. Our staff does not monitor the materials that children choose. The responsibility for the reading or viewing choices of children rests entirely with parents or legal guardians. This policy needs to be changed. We need to dissociate our library from the ALA and actually have policies that our community wants and not be told by the ALA what our policies should be.
Thank you. And then David Rice, you're on deck.
Or if I can put this up here, I'm not sure if it'll set up there or not. Laura Umfenauer, last month I spoke on how un-American it is that these religious MAGA fascists are trying to do with the school and library system. Upon leaving the meeting last month, I was met by two older women who felt they had the power to tell me that you are in the minority here, which prompted my seconded speech about who I am. These people believe that they are in the majority because they have their own small group of haters here, slowly chipping away at our democracy and freedoms in America. But I tell them it is they who are in the minority. As I have collected thousands of signatures in over 8 petition initiatives starting in 2010, and just now finishing up with the women's rights to reproductive health care. I've spoken to thousands of people at many events, door to door, library entrances, etc. I protested in Jeff City for healthcare for all, in which some of you may benefit here. The Women's March in Washington, D.C. I attended, as well as lobbied in Washington, D.C. I helped raise the minimum wage to $12.30 an hour in November, and in November, we can all vote on raising it to $15 per hour, a benefit to families to have a living wage in Missouri. And although they have their small group here threatening our library and board members of their position, there are people like myself that will always inform with facts and truth and always push back. Our books are our way to the future. Our books are what comfort us, educate us. Our books are what this building is about. It's not about separating out a segment of our society and demonizing them because your particular church preaches that. I doubt very much if many of these people have even left Missouri. I've traveled all over the world and have traveled to Saudi Arabia where they have a king. And in the staying there, I was required to wear a long back black cover that covered my entire body. Women are not allowed to work or drive there, and we have escorts everywhere. I also experienced the Matawa. This is the religious police that on prayer times, which was called over loudspeakers several times a day, that if persons were not in their mosque, also known as a church, the Matawa would come by and whip you and make you go to church. Is that going to be these religious MAGA fascists? Is that who these people are now? Are they going to become America's religious police, telling people how to think, how to act, what you can read, what you cannot read, and try to control its flow in knowledge and information? Is America going to become Sharia law? I suggest that people watch Hitler and the Nazis' evil on trial. Much of the same rhetoric and attacks that these white nationalists are doing today was done then. It's a repeat. Thank you.
David Rice. And Gretchen Garrity, you're up on deck.
Ms. Umfenauer, can we get a picture of your poster there?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
It's got two sides to it, but you're
Okay,
welcome.
yeah, let me just see if I can get it shot. A little bit. No, I didn't get it. Hold on.
Excuse me, we need to reclaim our time. We're gonna
No.
add 2 minutes.
No, you're not, sir.
Yes, we are.
Please sit down or leave.
You changed the guidelines. You made
I
the
haven't, sir.
guidelines.
You can leave now. Please leave.
I'm not causing problems. I was
Yes, you
just
are.
saying something.
You are speaking out of turn.
You gave us an opportunity to take that stuff up there before. She had that opportunity
Please.
too.
One
You
of
just
our,
burned our time.
sir, the board has the opportunity to comment and ask a question. That is exactly what she did. That is
You broke
it.
protocol. I did not. I'm calling.
I
the
did
issue
nothing.
today.
I said nothing. Please leave.
Would
You've
somebody call a
disrupted
point of order,
twice.
Please.
Now you're taking time.
You've disrupted twice. Please leave. Please leave. I can ask her to escort you or you can
I'm
leave.
silent now. I'm hoping I get my turn.
Sorry, David, go ahead.
Our natural rights from God are highlighted in the Constitution, which includes freedom of speech as one of the 5 protections in the First Amendment. This fundamental right extends to all citizens, including children, with limitations. Our Supreme Court destroyed the limitations and protections for children in the 2002 Ashcroft versus Free Speech Coalition decision when it struck down portions of the 1996 Child Pornography Prevention Act. This ruling narrowed the definition of child pornography to focus on material involving actual children rather than fictional or artistic depictions. Often, child predators are arrested with both images of children and virtual images of children. To illustrate the implications of this decision, consider this analogy. Imagine the court ruled that poop has a nutritional value for children. They determined as long as the poop was surrounded by buns, meat, and condiments, it wasn't poop anymore. It was now a hot dog. In the same way, the court wrongly decided porn was safe for children to consume. To help reinforce a harmful court's decision, the American Library Association's Library Bill of Rights asserts that children should have access to any material at any age, regardless of content. This stance creates a situation where libraries gleefully provide unrestricted access to materials that are inappropriate or harmful to children. Research from the American College of Pediatricians and multiple studies has shown that early exposure to pornography and sexually explicit content can lead to various negative outcomes for children and adolescents, including increased rates of depression and anxiety, acting out or violent behavior, younger age of sexual debut, sexual promiscuity, increased risk of teen pregnancy, distorted views of relationships between men and women. Where do we see these problems? In teenagers who think they are gay or trans. The ALA's interpretation of the Library Bill of Rights, which opposes age restrictions on library materials, is based on a concept developed in the 1960s by radical sociologist Edgar Friedenberg, who have advocated for equality of rights between adult and child library users. This view aligns with Marxist goals of abolishing family authority and traditional morality. The ALA is an openly Marxist organization that uses legislative efforts to codify the Library Bill of Rights. This will hinder parents' ability to protect their children from inappropriate content. Parents are separated from their children, and teachers and librarians are given the power of consent over children's decisions because they are the experts. In conclusion, the current interpretation of the ALA Library Bill of Rights and the limitations imposed by the Ashcroft decision purposely expose children to harmful content. The situation is analogous to offering children a hot dog that, while containing valuable nutrients, also contains poop. Once a contamination occurs, who is expert enough to clean it? Pornography hurts children and adults. There is no mature 13-year-old who can read Fun Home without being harmed. There is no 80-year-old who can read it without experiencing harm. Listen to the science, unless you are science deniers along with child groomers.
Lynetta, you're up after Gretchen.
So I'm here to talk about the Missouri Library Association and how it, as a chapter member of the ALA, influences our libraries and librarians to implement divisive goals. I've included copies to you of some of the pages of the MLA handbook that detail the connections of the American Library Association with their chapters. That includes cooperation on joint enterprises, providing financial support, and lobbying efforts to the ALA. On page 34, the handbook states, encourage libraries to adopt ALA's Freedom to Read Statement, Library Bill of Rights, and other statements adopted by the ALA and endorsed by the MLA. Adopt selection and collection development policies that protect against challenges. While I don't have time to address the areas of concern in this section on policies, suffice it to say that our library is currently acting in concert with the MLA idea that there is an enshrined right to read, regardless of age or content. Additionally, the MLA has a cultural diversity statement that promotes the division of our local community into groups based on race, gender, age, religion, language, socioeconomic status, ethnic background, national origin, special challenges, and sexual orientation. This includes library collections, services, and programs. While the Christian County Library is not listed on their website as an institutional member of the MLA, Mobius is, and our library contracts with Mobius. The upcoming MLA conference in September includes among its workshops Where We Belong, LGBTQ+ academic library workers and identity, social services for teens in the library, the right to read, strategies to advocate for intellectual freedom and privacy in libraries, library bond financing 101, planning a racial equity and social justice challenge at your library, transforming, supporting your transgender customers and colleagues, parts 1 and 2. Additionally, the MLA recently had the audacity to publicly admonish a local school board for implementing a local method of reviewing, evaluating, and determining their own collection of books in their school library. If we as a community wish to implement what works best for our own library system, I believe we must reevaluate the connections it has with the MLA's goals and policies. Individuals associated with the library can join the MLA, but they should not be able to implement plans or policies that run counter to our community's needs and wants.
And Elena, you're up next.
My name's Juanita Bright. I was going to speak on the public comment policy, but because of just what just happened, I think that this needs addressed. Whenever you look at the public comment policy, it says very clearly that you're supposed to be following the library code of conduct. So what just happened, this lady, and I don't call names. I'm tired of being called these ugly names and having propaganda stuck up here. What this lady just did, the use of profane or threatening language or other harassment of library patrons or staff will not be permitted. With her shirt and with what she just called us, she basically gave the middle finger to 75% of the people in here. Are you going to do something about that? She needs walked out. And you know what? If you're going to get on to my husband, maybe you need to turn the tables on her way. Short and sweet.
Kevin, you're up next.
A few months ago, I brought to your attention that our director sits on the board of Mobius, a company that the Christian County Library has a contract with for interlibrary loan services. I remain concerned that our director has a conflict of interest by remaining the treasurer now and board member of Mobius, while also directly participating in the conversation about the pros and cons of which software is best for our library. At our most recent meeting, as well as this evening, the director's opinion and knowledge of the competing company has been interjected repeatedly in the board discussion, which is very concerning considering her position at Mobius. The public has not received an answer as to whether our director has signed a conflict of interest form to protect taxpayer money from being mishandled. This is required of trustees, but I could not find this requirement of the director in our manual. Our policy manual states that public officials and employees of the library should be independent, impartial, and responsible to the people. I'm aware that the director's annual evaluation was held behind closed doors last month, and with concerns about the funds and integrity of our library, as well as ongoing issues that have not been truly addressed, I referred to the Missouri Public Library Trustee Manual. Page 50 of this manual says that in evaluating the director, you should ask many questions to determine whether this person is qualified to remain in their position, such as, are hard decisions made and implemented, or are they deferred or ignored? Does the director display initiative? And does the director make decisions objectively, or do personal biases intrude? Given public concern, I hope these questions were asked. Many of your patrons are concerned. At the very least, our director needs to abstain from further conversation about Missouri Evergreen, as well as to furnish proof that she has signed a conflict of interest form for our library. If she signed this form for Mobius, what does that say for the interests of the Christian County Library? How can we have faith that our nearly $4 million taxpayer-funded budget is being handled appropriately and without bias? Page 48 of the state manual says that trustees evaluate the director all the time by what you see in the library, what you hear from the public, and by the library's reputation in the community. With a new board of trustees, it's time for the director and board to make meaningful steps forward to represent our community. With what you see in our library and what you hear from the public, it's time for the board to stop rubber stamping the director's agenda and set your own clear guidelines for the director to follow instead. Page 47 of the state manual says, the director is responsible for the management of the library, but the board retains ultimate responsibility. Thank you.
Kevin. Reggie, you're after Kevin.
That was some more of our time that was taught, and this is my time. She started the clock on me immediately. Interesting. I would like to welcome John Gary to the Library Board of Trustees. Thank you, John, for serving the citizens of Christian County. For some time now, there's been friction between the citizens of Christian County and the board. Our commissioners have stepped in and commenced the process of rebuilding the relationship between our library and the public. It's disappointing that this conflict materialized in our public library. Fortunately, the original intent of our American library system has proved to be a success. It is encouraging to see that as citizens, we still have the freedom and courage and determination and access to the necessary information to set things back in order. What a blessing from Almighty God, and what a privilege to live in such a place in such a time as this. Patriarchs, prophets, philanthropists, educators, historians, missionaries, statesmen, and pastors alike have seen the wisdom of carefully curating and preserving books, making sure that the ideas of great minds, both spiritual and secular, are available for citizens. Many of our founding fathers, patriots who knew tyranny, knew the wisdom of preserving centuries of knowledge for the people and the communities by accumulating their own collection of books, making sure the population will have access to the free flow of knowledge, ingenuity, and ideas that enriched and made our nation great. The Reverend John Sharp planned a public library in New York. There's many things I'm going to leave out, but after being tempered and tried in the fire by our horrendous Civil War, our republic could boast over 3,500 libraries available to the public. Our founding fathers and patriots to this very day know what freedom, that with that freedom comes great responsibility. We know the value of history, we know the value of knowledge, we know that if we are to live long, peaceful lives, the standard of Almighty God has to be known and lived. My hope and prayer is that we can be examples for our children, as those great men and women in our past have been for me. I would like for us to take a moment and acknowledge our devotion to the ideals and honor the lives of those that were sacrificed for the freedom we have. I think it's appropriate for us to say our Pledge of Allegiance in public meetings. I ask anybody to join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And that freedom includes you all too.
After Reggie.
Good evening. Welcome, John, isn't that right? New board member, good to have you. I wrote at the top of my paper, it's time for change. You know, we've been at this for 22 months now. I have seen very little accomplished as far as trying to deal with the board. Seems like the 90% of the people that's always here is because they're concerned about the children. Why you wouldn't listen to us, I don't really know, unless you just rejected the truth after you heard it. Or as Paul said in 2 Corinthians 4:3, but if our gospel be hid, it's hid from those that are lost, of whom the God of this world, speaking of Satan, has blinded the minds of those that cannot see. You know, Jesus, talking about the last days in Matthew 24:12, he said, in the last days iniquity shall abound, and because of it the love of many would wax cold. That word iniquity is also translated as lawlessness, which really means living apart from God's laws or principles of the Bible. Like the 10 Commandments. What's wrong with them? Thou shalt not kill. God was thinking of us when he said that. Thou shalt not steal. He was thinking of our property. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Trying to keep your husband and your wife from beating you over the head with a ball bat. I mean, God was thinking of us. But we have today some trying to bring those in, some trying to bring them out. I don't see them posted anywhere in here. Be nice if they were. You know, these people that think just the opposite. They call themselves progressives. They call themselves liberals. But God in Romans chapter 1 calls them fools. Because that when they knew God or knew about God, they glorified him not as God. Neither were they thankful, and they became vain in their vain imaginations. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, And he tells how they done that. They dishonored their own bodies between themselves. Women changed the natural use into that which is against nature, men lying with men. And because of it, God gave them up to a reprobate mind, a mind void of judgment. And I hope that's not the case. It's kind of interesting. I had to laugh a little bit here. That word fools, that God calls them fools. The Greek word is morano, M-O-R-A-I-N-O. We get the English word moron, which it means an empty-headed clown. They say we're so smart and intelligent. God says no. People who thinks that way is a bunch of morons. Yeah.
Mike Sullivan, you're up after Teresa.
I thank you, trustees, for the job that you do. I'm here talking about the banning books in public.
Thank you.
All right, somebody. Go ahead. Okay, anyway. As far as I'm concerned, as a parent, and I do am a parent, I have a son, that responsibility for what my child checks out of the library is for me to do. It is not for other people to decide. Other parents are not going to decide what my child is going to read. If you're going to ban books, and you need to ban some of the romance novels too, because I'm sure some of you gals have read them. I've not read them, but I know the series Outlanders has some pretty sexy scenes in it, so maybe we need to get rid of those. How about, have you banned any of the TV ads that show women? You shouldn't let your children, you never know when they're going to come up. See women in their bras and panties, and the one that's shaving her crotch for her pubic hairs. And trying to push the Christian religion and everything. I'm a Christian, but this country was founded on freedom of religion. Thomas and Jefferson said, make no laws respecting established religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof.
That's right.
As a parent, you're not responsible for what my child reads, nor should you be able to ban books. Some of you don't want to have sex education books. That's real great. I hope your daughter doesn't end up pregnant, or your daughter or son end up with some disease. They need to know this so they know how to handle situations when things happen. Excuse me. You make decisions for your children, I'll make decisions for mine. And I'll leave you with this. Live so that if your life were turned into a book, Florida would ban it.
Mike Sullivan. And Mary, you're up next. I think we should be able to get you in there. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you to the board for letting me speak. When I walked in, I was asked to pray. I feel inadequate, but I'm honored that I was asked. So Father, we just thank you. We thank you for this country we're in. We thank you for all the freedoms and how we're blessed. You are a good God. Thank you. We thank you that we have these libraries open, Father, for information. I know when I was a kid how I loved to read, Father, and how you expanded our minds. We just thank you for that. You're a good God. We thank you for this board. These people are taking time to work to maintain the affairs of the library and how things are run, Father. So we thank you. We thank you for our county commissioners. Special blessings upon them, Lord, for their wisdom on picking these perfect people to be in these seats, Father. Pray you just go before them, continue to bless them, Father. And the board, pray you will give them wisdom on what books we should have in the library and which ones we shouldn't. We know this country was founded on your moral values, Father, so we just lift those up, that we would maintain those in everything we do. We pray we glorify you in all we do, Lord. These things we lift up in the mighty name of Jesus Christ our Savior. Amen. Amen. And I just want to say real quick, we were over at the library on Thursday night at a function, and there's still porn books that I'm 59. I'd be embarrassed to read them. I can't imagine they're on the shelf. And I also like to say nothing. We can have differences and talk about it. We're not haters. Just because we don't agree with what you say, or vice versa, we're not haters. We just disagree. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Right. Tonight, I would like to share some of my library experiences with the Board of Trustees in hopes that it provides you with meaningful information to help you in your decision making. I'm a mom of 2 children whom I homeschool. We have a family that loves to learn and read. My children are at a critical age, and my husband and I are working hard to foster a love of literacy in our children. As of from January 2023 to now, our family has checked out over 500 books from the Christian County Library, so I think our efforts are working. Mobius went offline on April 18, 2024. Initially, the public was told the system would be down for 4 to 6 weeks, while it went under software upgrades. That time came and went. 13 weeks later, Mobius is still not operational. I was told by library staff that they are now expecting for Mobius to be back in service by early fall. As a homeschool parent who frequents the library, this outage comes at a very inconvenient time. Due to the amount of time Mobius has not been operational, I hope you guys receive a credit for the services not being rendered. Prior to going offline, I noticed several failures with Mobius. There were long wait lines to borrow books. Upon requesting materials, they would take 1 to 2 months to arrive at the library for me. This is contrary to Mobius's claim that their courier system provides access to over 1,000 libraries in the Midwest with delivery in 3 to 4 days. I took time to reach out to librarians in Stone, Douglas, and Texas counties who utilize Missouri Evergreen. They had nothing but positive feedback about their experiences utilizing the service. All librarians commented on how great the turnaround is on book borrowing. It takes about a week for available books to reach their final destination. There's also a great selection of books available in Evergreen, and the database is easy for their patrons to navigate. I want to quickly switch gears and address an ongoing issue that has not been strongly considered by our board. We continue to have age-inappropriate content accessible to minors and on display. Fun Home, a family tragic comedy, is currently on display in front of the children's section of the Nixa branch. I read this graphic novel today. Not only is the content disturbing, the graphically depicted images of genitalia and sex acts is inappropriate for minors. This book should not be placed on such a highly trafficked location and should be housed in the adult section of the library, like the Greene County Library does. I'm going to give you guys a request for reconsideration for this book. It is due to the placement of age-inappropriate books in and around the children's section that my children no longer explore the library to borrow material. The number of books we check out now pales in comparison to the number of books we were bringing home from years past. The current library policies are hurting children. They are being deprived of the joy that comes with browsing the shelves of our libraries and going on their next adventure. And what I want to do is I just want to show the public some of the pictures that are in this book, right in front of the kids section. Here's a picture of a penis. We have pictures of sex acts, of lesbian sex acts in front of the kids section.
Thank you, Mary.
People had a chance
If
to
you're
read
done,
the
thank
kids
you.
without that.
All right, this meeting is adjourned.